Welcome to High Noon Club. The whistle has blown. We'll get started right off this afternoon. Every High Noon Club meeting, we start out with an opening prayer, which is going to be the Representative Paul Wesselhoft will do our opening prayer, ex-Army Ranger, and then we'll do the salute to the American flag, which is up front. Representative Wesselhoft.
Let's bow our heads for prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for this opportunity that we have to assemble together and discuss important issues, political issues, and we do this without fear of harassment and without fear of being put in prison, as it is in some parts of this world. We thank you, Father, for that freedom, and we know it doesn't come freely, that men and women are out there preserving that freedom for us, and we ask you to bless them and protect them and keep them safe from harm's way. Heavenly Father, the things we do today, may they honor your name, for it's in your name, Jesus Christ, that we pray and commit ourselves. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Hi, I'm Don. I've got a public service announcement for you. As of today, each taxpayer owes $150,640 to the federal government.
Do that one more time. Let's say one more time because that's going to be perfect.
Each of us taxpayers owe $150,640 each.
Almost $151,000. Now, $151,000 is more than the median income or median cost of a home in Oklahoma City market. Now, think of that. So, I don't know what your home's probably worth so many million dollars or whatever. So it'd be about 8 times or whatever. So, but anyway, just think about that. You just give your house. Most people have just given their house, if you've got it all paid for, to the federal government on debt.
It also tells you how few people we've got who are taxpayers.
And then another thing what it will tell you is that how bankrupt the country actually is. And think about this. We've got, in Oklahoma, we've got a legislative body that has almost doubled, I think it's almost doubled the expenditures in Oklahoma in the last 10 years by a Republican-led legislator. Okay, perfect. That'll lead us right into what we're going to do. You ready, Maestro? Okay, we're going to do this, and then as soon as Paul does this, and after this is over, then I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, the Representative Randy Grau from Edmond. Thanks, Randy. Okay, let's get right on into the Paul, if you're ready. Let's do this deal.
Okay, this is charity. Mr. Speaker, I have said that we can give away as much of our own money as we please.
Just 1 second.
I will not go into an argument to prove that Congress has no power to appropriate this money as an act of charity. Every member upon this floor knows it. We have the right, as individuals, to give away as much of our own money as we please in charity. But as members of Congress, we have no right so to appropriate $1 of public money. Some eloquent appeals have been made to us upon the ground that it is a debt due the deceased. Mr. Speaker, the deceased lived long after the close of the war. He was in the office to the day of his death, and I have never heard that the government was in arrears to him. Every man in this House knows it is not a debt. We cannot, without the grossest corruption, appropriate this money as the payment of a debt. We have not the semblance of authority to appropriate it as charity. Mr. Speaker, I have said that we have the right to give as much money of our own as we please. I'm the poorest man on this floor. I cannot vote for this bill, but I will give 1 week's pay to the object, and if every member of Congress will do the same, it will amount to more than the bill asks. He took his seat, and nobody replied. The bill was put upon its passage, and instead of passing unanimously, as was generally supposed, and as no doubt it would be but for that speech, it received but few votes, and of course was lost. Later, when asked by a friend why he had opposed the appropriation, Crockett gave this explanation. Several years ago, I was one evening standing on the steps of the Capitol with some other members of Congress when our attention was attracted by a great light over Georgetown. It was evidently a large fire. We jumped into a hack and drove over as fast as we could. In spite of all that could be done, many homes were burned and many families made homeless. And besides, some of them had lost all but the clothes they had on. The weather was very cold, and when I saw so many women and children suffering, I felt that something ought to be done for them. The next morning, a bill was introduced appropriating $20,000 for their relief. We put aside all other business and rushed it through as soon as it could be done. The next summer, when it began to be time to think about the election, I concluded I would take a scout around among the boys of my district. I had no opposition there, but as the election was some time off, I did not know what might turn up. When riding one day in a part of my district in which I was more a stranger than any other, I saw a man in a field plowing and coming toward the road. I gauged my gait so that we should meet as he came to the fence. As he came up, I spoke to the man. He replied politely, but as I thought, rather coldly. I began, "Well, friend, I'm one of those unfortunate beings called candidates, and yes, I know," he said, "you are Colonel Crockett. I've seen you once before and voted for you the last time you were elected. I suppose you are out electioneering now, but you had better not waste your time or mine. I shall not vote for you again." This was a Sockdolager. I begged him to tell me what was the matter. "Well, Colonel, it's hardly worthwhile to waste time or words upon it. I do not see how it can be mended, but you gave a vote last winter which shows that either you have not capacity to understand the Constitution or that you are wanting in honesty and firmness to be guided by it. In either case, you are not the man to represent me. But I beg your pardon for expressing it in that way. I did not intend to avail myself of the privilege of the constituent to speak plainly to a candidate for the purpose of insulting or wounding you. I intended by it only to say that your understanding of the Constitution is very different from mine. And I will say to you what, but for my rudeness, I should not have said, that I believe you to be honest. But an understanding of the Constitution different from mine, I cannot overlook, because the Constitution, to be worth anything, must be held sacred and rigidly observed in all of its provisions. The man who wields power and misrepresents it is the more dangerous, the more honest he is. I admit the truth of all you say, but there must be some mistake about it, for I do not remember that I gave any vote last winter upon any constitutional question. No, Colonel, there is no mistake. Though I live here in the backwoods and seldom go from home, I take the papers from Washington and read very carefully all the proceedings in Congress. My paper says that last winter you voted for a bill to appropriate $20,000 to some sufferers by a fire in Georgetown. Is that true? Well, my friend, I may as well own up. You've got me there. But certainly nobody will complain that a great and rich country like ours should give the insignificant sum of $20,000 to relieve its suffering women and children, particularly with a full and overflowing treasury. And I'm sure if you had been there, you would have done just as I did. It's not the amount, Colonel, that I complain of, it's the principle. In the first place, the government ought to have in the Treasury no more than enough for its legitimate purposes. But that has nothing to do with the question. The power of collecting and dispersing money at pleasure is the most dangerous power that can be entrusted to man, particularly under our system of collecting revenue by tariff, which reaches every man in the country, no matter how poor he may be, and the poorer he is, the more he pays in proportion to his means. What is worse, it presses upon him without his knowledge where the weight centers, for there is not a man in the United States who can ever guess how much he pays to the government. So you see that while you are contributing to relieve one, you are drawing it from thousands who are even worse off than he. If you had the right to give anything, the amount was simply a matter of discretion with you, and you had as much right to give $20 million as $20,000. If you had the right to give one, you have the right to give to all. And as the Constitution never defines charity nor stipulates the amount, you are at liberty to give anything and everything which you may believe or profess to believe is a charity, and to any amount that you may think proper. You will very easily perceive what a wide door this would open for fraud and corruption and favoritism on the one hand, and for robbing the people on the other. No, Colonel, Congress has no right to give charity. Individual members may give as much of their own money as they please, but they have no right to touch a dollar of the public money for that purpose. If twice as many houses had been burned in this county as in Georgetown, neither you nor any other member of Congress would have thought of appropriating a dollar for our relief. There are about 240 members of Congress. If they had shown their sympathy for the sufferers by contributing each one's week's pay, it would have made over $13,000. There are plenty of men in and around Washington who could give him $20,000 without depriving themselves of even the luxury of life. The congressmen chose to keep their own money, which, if reports be true, some of them spend not very credible. And the people about Washington no doubt applauded you for relieving them from the necessity of giving by giving what was not yours to give. The people have delegated to Congress by the Constitution the power to do certain things. To do these, it is authorized to collect and pay monies, and for nothing else. Everything beyond this is usurpation and a violation of the Constitution. So, you see, Colonel, you violated the Constitution at what I consider a vital point. It is a precedent fraught with danger to the country. For when Congress once begins to stretch its power beyond the limits of the Constitution, there is no limit to it and no security for the people. I have no doubt you acted honestly, but that does not make it any better, except as far as you are personally concerned. And you see that I cannot vote for you.
Not yours to give, the Davy Crockett story. This is literally the second time we played this in this room, and I would really like to thank Paul Subwood of Bott Radio for having that produced and done for us. Thanks so much to Bott Radio. Give us a big round of applause. Bott Radio has been so supportive of the High Noon Club over the years, and providing Paul Subwood to come down to our audio, video, and a whole bunch of other behind-the-scene type activities for High Noon Club. So thanks to Bott Radio, and thank you, Paul Subwood. We're never going to actually literally be able to thank certain people enough in this room for what you've actually done for the community and the good. But again, thanks so much, Paul, for doing that for us. Not yours to give. There's always going to be a lot of pressure in this room on certain people more than others. Our elected people are continually faced with a huge problem. Not yours to give. But think about the Davy Crockett story when he was elected to be a congressman in that. And what he actually, the challenges that he faces, they're no different, the peer pressures are no different than they are today. In this room today, and I'm going to do a little bit of a bragging, there's more than two, but there's two people that I want to kind of highlight today. One of them is Jerry Finn, Attorney Jerry Finn, public servant, goes out there and fights the Supreme Court, or fights these, what I'm going to say, log-rolling bills or whatever, and challenges them and makes them, shows that they're unconstitutional because it's not yours to give. Challenging the system. So thanks very much for coming today, Jerry. Public service, he does this as a public service like a hobby. I mean, how much money have you literally made on any of these challenges you've done, Jerry?
None. It's all pro bono.
Think of that, okay? Another an elected public official, Gary Jones, great auditor for the state of Vermont. Thanks, Gary. Thanks for what you do. He's one of those guys that is going to stand up and does exactly what he promises to do. How many people, when they're out there campaigning on the campaign trail, do exactly what they say they were going to do? How many, do we have a round of applause? Can you produce almost anybody that does that? It's almost an impossible task, to be perfectly honest. I know when I was out campaigning, I was literally saying certain things. I thought, oh my gosh, I hope I don't have to do all these things that I'm telling these people, because they got me in a panic here. I've got some elderly woman and her dog biting at my leg, telling me different kind of things. I think, oh my gosh, I can't wait to leave this doorstep. But again, if you can't do what you promised to do, would you please stop running for public office and do us all a favor? Today we've got in the room, we're going to actually have, there's three phases today what we're actually going to do. We're going to have an opportunity to talk about possibly three different things. I'm going to kind of save the first two. But the first one we're going to discuss is Representative Randy Grau. If you'll please step to the podium and give us what your take is going on at the House of Representatives this year. And then we'll have a little Q&A. Randy is a representative from District 81 in Edmond. And how long have you been a rep, Randy?
I'm starting my 4th year, so this is the end of my 2nd term.
And then what do you do for a livelihood besides being a representative of the state of Oklahoma?
Well, I practice business law and commercial sector, represent Oklahomans, help them protect and grow their businesses, especially like working with startups. I appreciate you having me, and always look forward to being with High Noon. It's been too long since I've been here. Anytime I am with this group and in this room, I know I am in the safest place in the state of Oklahoma. So I do not have to worry about that, and especially love to be with my constituents, dear friends and neighbors, Paul and Molly Warenberg, who have been here, I know, since the very beginning. And also great to see so many colleagues in the room, and Representative Shannon, good to see you as well. And we don't get to see you as much. You're a busy guy, and so it's great to have you. I like to do this whenever I talk to groups. I talk to school groups or leadership groups that come up to the Capitol. I usually poll the audience just to kind of get an idea of who I'm talking to. But let me just do a real quick poll that I hope leads into what I want to talk to you about today. How many of you think that at the Oklahoma State Capitol we could have a better budget process? Raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to say 99.99% with a, I don't know, error rate of about 2 percentage points plus or minus. How many of you, second question, how many of you believe that at the Oklahoma State Capitol every year we pass too many laws? And there we go again about that 99.99. I agree with you on both accounts. And so what I have been doing, and I've been working on since before I was elected, and I've been working on for the 3 years that I've there is a fix or a solution to that. And for the first time this week, we've actually made some progress with the passage of HJR 1003 out of the House Rules Committee. HJR 1003 will put a question on the state ballot in November that will change the way that we do government. It'll change the way that we do the budget process, and it will also make sure that we do not pass as many laws. What does that do? Well, what it does is in odd-numbered years, so when we first come into session, the only thing that we will do as a legislature, both sides of the rotunda, is pass a budget. Because you know what? Under the Constitution, that's the only thing we have to do. And so we will turn the entire legislative body into one big appropriations and budget committee. And the purpose for that is so that we have a top-down, bottom-up, drill-down review every line of every agency budget. Because let me explain to you how it works now. I know most of you know this. Over on the House side, we have the Appropriations and Budget Committee, and then we have subcommittees that cover several different subjects. I'm the vice chair of the Appropriations and Budget Subcommittee on Higher Education. I did not volunteer to get in the middle of higher education budgeting. I was volunteered for that. But I have 2 universities in my district. One's a big public, in fact, the 3rd largest public university in the state. And then I have a small Christian private university. Very different missions, very different goals. But there's a lot of higher education that takes place in my district up in Edmond and North Oklahoma City. The way it typically works is these A and B subcommittees will meet before session, and we may have a day-long meeting where we have these groups that come in, and we have approximately 1 hour, if we're lucky 2 hours, where they put on a dog and pony show, and then we're supposed to be able to ask questions and get answers about their budget requests. This year, though, my committee was joined with the Senate committee. We had a common education in front of us. We had the physician manpower training company, and we had the Regents for Higher Education. The Regents for Higher Education have an almost $1 billion budget, and we had 1 hour with the state regents. 1 hour. Now again, shouldn't we do some research outside of that committee meeting? Absolutely. Do we do that? As best as we can. Go and meet with them, invite them to meet with us, go to other presentations, read as much as we can, and that's what we're supposed to do. But you have to realize, being a representative is a full-time position, but it's supposed to be a part-time job. We're supposed to be out working in the community. We also have 2,100 bills that are introduced approximately every year. That doesn't include our appropriations bills. And so that's why I think this is the best fix. What we will do is, on those odd-numbered years, do nothing but the budget. And I think that that means if we need a full day, if we meet 2, 3, 4 committee meetings with the state regions for higher education, so be it. And let's go line by line through the budget. Let's have every member have a voice in the process. Let's make sure that every member is engaged, is educated, and is informing their citizens about how your money is being spent. And we're not going to pass any substantive legislation that year. We're only going to work on the budget. I think it's a better process. I think it's a more transparent process. I think you will have more voices at the table, and I think we'll get a better budget. So then what do we do the next year? Well, then the next year, we will again pass a budget, but you got to think we've done a lot more of the legwork the year before than we've ever done. I mean, right now, we pass all of these substantive laws and we try and do a budget. And you guys, I know you watch the news, you read the newspapers, and you see what happens that last 2 weeks of session where we're all scrambling around trying to get a budget passed. Anyways, in those off years or in the next year when we have a general session, that is when we will consider our legislation that amends, introduces new laws, things of that nature. Well, what happens if there's an emergency? And that's the question that I get, because legislatures, including Oklahoma's, used to meet every other year. And there are some states that still do that, and in fact there's a lot of states that do this alternate type of sessions where you have a fiscal session and then a general session. It was really in the late 1960s when a lot of state legislatures started meeting every year, and the reason they did that was respond to mandates from the federal government. They had to start passing laws to comply with these large federal acts. Unfortunately, they didn't pass too many laws to fight against them at that point in time. Anyways, during the off years or the fiscal years, there will still be a mechanism to introduce legislation if we need to respond to something that's coming from the federal government. But it's going to take a supermajority. We're going to have to make sure that it's something that the state legislature really feels needs to be addressed. Otherwise, in those even-numbered years, we're going to do a budget and then we can introduce our legislation. Like I said, this is something that has been in the works for a while, and I'm amazed at the amount of positive feedback that I receive, not just from constituents and folks in the community, but in the House. There are so many people that I have talked to that said, I don't understand why we have to meet every year to pass all of these laws, to do the budget. Why can't we just focus? This is a great idea, Randy, I want to sign on. In fact, the same day that I passed this unanimously, 6-0, bipartisan vote out of the Rules Committee, it also passed later that day out of the Administrative Rules Committee by a freshman representative. And he came to me and I said, I heard you pass this earlier today and that you've got momentum for this. I said, absolutely. He goes, I'm signing on to your bill. Let's have one bill, let's be united, let's take this to a vote of the people. So please contact your representatives, HJR 1003. And let's see if we can get this moving. The Senate also had a resolution. It did not even get a hearing over on the Senate side. So we have our work cut out for us. But, like I said, the more that I talk to people like you, the more that I talk to people inside that building, except for a very few, most people are very receptive of this because they understand that there's a lot of time and resources wasted up there trying to pass unneeded laws just to justify our own existence. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Q&A. Hands up. First names only.
Hi, Representative. Thanks for coming. My name is Woody. I'd like to ask, did you say there was a bill introduced in the Senate, but it never made it to the floor?
It never even got a hearing in committee over on the Senate side.
Okay, so nobody follows the Constitution that says they have to be read on the floor 3 times before they get passed? And there's nothing in the Constitution that says these things have to go to a committee.
That's a great point, and the author probably could have tried to push it to the floor.
Well, the author shouldn't have to push it because the Constitution requires it.
Fair
You don't
enough.
get, the House rules obviously do not comport with the Constitution. That's something that needs to be taken care of first, before anything else gets done. You know, if you can't follow the Constitution as it's written, how do we know you're gonna follow any rules that you make later? I think it's a very important point.
I agree.
Do it.
Okay. Oh, okay, let's do it.
I have a little comp injury on Wesselhoft.
Sir, Mr. Grau, my name is Jim. Did I misunderstand you when you said that one session would be purely fiscal and you'd work on a budget, and that the other alternate session, there would be both general legislation and?
That's correct.
Why not, is it inconceivable to do a 2-year budget during the fiscal year, or during one session?
No, I don't know if you heard the question. Why not just do budget 1 year and actually pass it for 2 years? You do a 2-year budget, or you could do 2 1-year budgets. And that's what you see in states like Arkansas and states like Virginia that have purely alternating sessions. My initial legislation did that exact same thing. And I received pushback from the committee. They want to do the budget every year. And so in the spirit of compromise, I said, you know what? Let's move the ball that direction, because at least we have one session where we will do nothing but focus on the budget. And then, again, we're going to have that second session where we can introduce legislation. Again, 2 goals, 2 purposes here. Better budget process, better budget, less laws. And so I think we're getting there with this legislation. But no, absolutely, we could get to the point where we just do the budget every other year. I actually had this question come up. Well, you know, what if it's one of these years where we don't have a lot of money to spend? And so, you know, we're having to do cuts and everything, and we're done in like 60 days. What then?
Duh.
We leave. Yeah, we go, how about we go home and save our constituents some money? Great idea, yeah. We don't have to be there for 4 months every year. And again, a state of our size with 3.8 million people, we do not need full-time legislators, and we're not supposed to be full-time legislators as a job. As a position, absolutely, but not as a job. We don't need to be meeting for 4 months every year to pass as many bills as we do, and that's why I'm introducing the legislation.
Question.
I'm Scott. I hope to join you in 2015, Randy. I am going to ask you 2 kind of opposite issues here. One is nullification, one is a convention of the states. Nullification being an enforcement of the Constitution, and a convention of the states being a revision of the Constitution. Which do you prefer to involve yourself in, and do you see a problem with either of those?
I've always been a fan of nullification and believe that it's typically misunderstood, or at least misapplied, and that the states have not thoroughly exercised their powers under the 10th Amendment. Nullification, though, is not a single act. Nullification is a strategy, and it's a plan. And actually, I think we're just now starting to figure out, and I am a big fan of our Attorney General, because our Attorney General understands nullification through the cases that he's bringing. And we've seen that with the challenges that, Bob, you mentioned earlier, that we've seen in our own Supreme Court. So, now, absolutely, I support nullification. Now, do we just pass a law or resolution and it's nullified? No. And that's why there's a whole strategy that's involved. Now, as far as a convention of the states, I'm not convinced yet. I did not support a con-con. Do I support a balanced budget amendment? Absolutely I do. Absolutely I do. And I think that we can get there, and we don't necessarily have to get there through an Article 5 convention. But my mind's open to that. But I'm not ready to sign on just yet.
Question.
Reed, did I understand you to say that the budget for higher ed is almost $1 billion?
You understood that correctly.
Gary, would you confirm what I think you said one time, that you can audit every state agency but higher ed? Is that correct?
I can audit most state agencies, but we're not allowed to audit higher ed unless we receive a request from the governor, from the board of higher ed, or a joint resolution speaker and the pro tem.
You've been very successful.
It used to be the speaker or the pro tem, but back when the Democrats realized that the Republicans would take over the House in 2004, they changed it to the speaker and the pro tem. There's never been a request made by them.
You have been very successful in rooting out waste from the conversations you and I have had. Why can he not audit higher ed?
Great question.
Is there an answer?
Let's do it. No, that decision or that exclusion wasn't made during my time there. And I mean, we have representatives here who have a lot more institutional knowledge, have been there a while longer. I don't see any reason why our state auditor and inspector should not be allowed to audit higher ed.
But there's one great advantage you do have. You've got counsel down there, legal counsel down there to counsel you on that, if that is legal, correct? From the House counsel.
To counsel us on whether
Yeah,
what is
it's
legal.
legal for the state auditor to audit higher ed.
Right, sure. Well, he just answered that.
Yeah. So what I guess kind of where I'm coming from, and we'll go on to the next questions, could we do that? Could you ask for that question then about let's do the audit of higher ed?
Well, sure. I'll talk to my speaker and let's have the senators talk to their leader over there and let's get a joint request and get it done.
Perfect.
Or let's call the governor's office. I mean, it sounds like we can request it, and so again, it's kind of like going to the balanced budget amendment. Let's work with our elected officials to get that done.
Okay,
I'll make that request on Monday.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for doing this.
I'm Glenn Howard. It's good to be in your district. Randy is my representative. I appreciate what you're saying about the budget. It sounds great and wonderful, but I'm wondering, are we really not spitting in the wind or whistling Dixie? There's, in my same district, a senator by the name of Clark Jolly, who enjoys rewarding the departments that support the kind of things he wants. And when you've got senators who can dole out money the way appears to be happening, regardless of what the House does, representatives do, is the Senate even going to consider, as you said, they haven't so far, and isn't this an exercise in futility?
No, because again, we don't necessarily win the war in one battle, and so we have to keep fighting. The fact is, last year I pushed to get this bill heard in committee. We don't want to hear any state questions until next year. This week was the last week I could have possibly gotten this heard. I had to go and sit down with each individual member because there is a concern about, well, this is the way we've always done things. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And I said, you're telling me the budgeting process isn't broken. Well, okay, that's a good point. So let's start to look at fixes. You're telling me you don't think we passed too many laws. Okay, so we've got to convince, first of all, that it's broken and that we can do better. The fact of the matter is, I was surprised to see in the Oklahoman this morning a blurb on this HJR 1003. Granted, it was about this long, this many pages. Now they had, a full page and a half about the abortion bill that we just passed, and that's an important fight. But the fact that they're even talking about legislative reform, I'm telling you that building tends to bristle under new ideas. I get that. I'm not saying this is easy, but we're advancing the ball. I'm here talking to you about this. We've got a chance to get it heard on the floor. If we have a chance to get it heard on the floor, it's like anybody who's on the ballot has a chance of getting elected. If we have a chance of getting it heard on the floor, then we may get it heard on the floor. If we get it heard on the floor, we have a chance of getting it passed. If we have a chance of getting it passed, then we have a chance of getting it passed over on the Senate. But until we get it passed on our side, we can't even put them in the position of having to turn us down. Sounds like, my dates in high school. Yeah.
You're talking about your dates in high school.
I met my wife in high school, all right? So I married my high school sweetheart, so.
There's rumors out there. Okay, next question.
My name is Paul. If you guys are going to cut down on the time that you spend at the legislature by doing a budget every other year, so you cut your time in the office down, are you going to give us back the salary commensurate to what you cut down? And secondly, if that gives you more time to look at bills, are you then going to read the bills instead of passing bills like this Treaurer College deal that passed, and several legislators said they didn't even know what was in it, they didn't have time to read it? A legislator should never push a yes button if he does not know what he's voting on at any time, ever.
Yes. Yes and yes. I agree on both points. And that was over on the Senate side. And now again, you know, last year we had an issue with horse processing or horse slaughter facilities, okay? Now, I grew up in Edmond, Oklahoma. You may be surprised to find out that I had never once thought about horse processing facilities in my whole time. And you know, when I went door to door to door to door, that issue never came up. But the thing is, I had to get educated on it. I mean, and that's just, you never know what's going to come down to it. Now again, if we're talking about some sort of legal reforms, judicial reforms, things, that I'm very comfortable with that as an attorney. But when we're talking about cervidae or deer farming, I'm not. So there's so many different issues that you have to get educated, and I mean, that's why I try to call constituents when I have a question about something that I know I'm ignorant of. I mean, just to be plain with you. But yeah, we need, you know how we can fix that? How about we have less laws to consider? Again, one of the solutions.
Okay, hold it. No, wait a minute. We're having a sidebar conversation.
Sorry about
We're not
that.
going to do that. Sorry, Randy. Are you done? Are you done?
Oh no, I just, here's what it comes down to. I try to, every year, introduce or pass as much repeal legislation as I do substantive legislation. Frankly, that scares some people. Well, if this was passed into law, then we needed it and everything else. And I say, well, it's either blatantly unconstitutional, it's outdated, it's unnecessary. But here's the thing, the more law you pass, the less freedom and liberty you have. That's simple.
Okay, good. Next question.
Well, it looks like we're out of time.
Hold on. You're going to have to sit down. I forgot. I messed up.
I'm Maggie, and I have a friend on Facebook named a political personality in, I think, Long Beach, named Steve Mozina. Have you heard of him? He has a website called postthefinances.com. And if you go there, it explains how all the budgets can be put online, therefore they will be subject to scrutiny by everyone, not just the special committees. Therefore, there will be more pressure, which the committees might welcome, on different items that are brought to light, like wasteful spending and etc. I wonder if that theory has been thought of or might be checked on to add to your bill.
Before you answer, give one more time. What's that website?
Postthefinances.com.
Okay.
That's a great idea, and one of the things that I've seen in my time as part of the legislature, especially on the House side, is I think trying to open up the process. The fact that conference committees actually meet is something that hadn't been done before. Conference committees were just, these are the conferees, and then you go around from office to office and get them to sign off. And so we have seen, I think, some great strides forward in transparency in the House. I think we can always do better. I think that we can push for more disclosure online and getting those finances out there, and that's again why I would like to see a budget process where you see these appropriations budget subcommittees not just sit and be talked at by these agency heads, engage in a dialogue, and then I would like to see these A and B subcommittees sit in open meeting and discuss the budget. and actually talk about whether that's corrections or common ed or higher ed or transportation, whatever it is, to actually sit and talk about. And I will say, working with the chairman of my committee, we sat down and we were looking at different items because she was going in to report to the A and B chair. And we were actually commended because we said, hey, we're okay with a 5% cut. Hey, we're okay with a 3.5% cut. And at least in that meeting, we were the only subcommittee that at that point had said, yes, let's go ahead and cut these agency budgets. Hopefully some more people will come on board, but I'd like to see the whole committee have that conversation out loud in public.
Question.
Thank you, Randy. I'm Mike. There's a couple of...
Hi, Mike.
Hi. There's a lot of different things that we could discuss, but I'm just going to try to get it back to your HJR.
Thank you.
And just ask you two specific questions. One is, would you sponsor a resolution, maybe even next week, that prevents groups from coming to the floor of the House of Representatives to honor a football team, a wrestling team, a basketball team, a baseball team? Because we've got plenty of time, I believe. Now maybe you don't, but I was very frustrated this week to see someone come up and lobby for an education bill before we took the vote. Completely out of order. I was reprimanded in the House of Representatives for calling someone else down that had done that previously. So would you sponsor a resolution next week saying we will no longer allow, and I'll co-sponsor it with you, no longer allow outside groups to come to the floor of the House of Representatives and speak? That's my first question, to give us more time to look at the budget. Could I count you to go off to that with me?
Oh, I want to read your language.
Now let you draft it.
Well,
Go ahead. Okay, let's don't put on the spot. Okay, ask the question.
No, I didn't. Ask the question. Okay. My second question is, the legislature can do right now exactly what you want to occur without passing a constitutional question. I suspect that you submitted a huge number of bills last year and this year. I've actually got counts and everybody, but I know that was going to be mentioned today. And so will you commit from now on, as long as you're in the legislature, you'll only introduce bills of substance during one term of the 2-year term that you're elected? And I understand you can say, well, other people might be introducing them too. Then just say, I'm going to vote no on every other bill that's introduced in that second year. And if there's so many people that are for this resolution, then we'll solve the problem without having to go to the high expense of sending this to a vote of the people.
a couple of great points. Number one, I try to self-regulate by introducing as much repealer legislation as I do substantive legislation, like I said, to start reducing what we have on the law books right now. And to Speaker Shannon's credit, when he started not just the Administrative Rules Committee, it was also named Government Oversight and Repealer. For the first time that I was a member of that committee, the first time that I'm aware of, we had a committee that was actually focused on repealing bills or law. And that committee's been quite successful at that. We could pass a House rule that just says, hey, in these off years, we're not going to consider any substantive legislation. So heads up, Senate, if you send over any sort of, legislation of new law or amendments, we're not going to consider it. Well, that's fine, but that doesn't really help out the taxpayers or the constituents, because the Senate's still over there burning up their time passing all of these things that we're not going to consider. That's why I want to change the Constitution, so that we're all on the same page. Now, on the first issue, I'll answer that. To what extent are we going to limit that? Because again, I know sometimes that it's cumbersome when we have every team that comes and gets recognized. But I'll tell you what, last year I had the opportunity to honor one of the widows of a fallen soldier. It's part of an outside group. And I think that's important that we take the time to do that, and I don't care if it's in a deadline week or not.
Question.
I learned this morning that 90% of the public is against Common Core. What's it going to take to get that abomination repealed?
We've already passed legislation out of committee on the House side, and it's moving its way through the process for it to go. And you and I have talked about that many times. I'll tell you what, this is where I can tell we have turned over a new leaf on this. I got a call from a classmate of mine that I graduated with. She's a teacher, husband's a principal, both Democrats, and she called and said, it's time to get rid of Common Core. And she said, you know I'm a blue. That's what she said, you know I'm a blue. It's time to get rid of Common Core. I said, I'm so glad to hear you say that. People's eyes have been opened, and it's because we've continued to talk about and educate the public, its parents, its teachers, now its administrators. Their eyes are open. So support your representatives, because it's moving its way through the process on the House side.
Question?
My name is Gary. Okay. Would you consider requiring that all agencies go through an in-depth analysis on needs-based budgeting, which is a modified version of zero-based budgeting, and then those numbers be presented to you as opposed to the agencies being the ones that present those numbers to you?
Absolutely. And the thing is, it takes time. It takes time to get involved and to review these things. And again, if you have legislators that are trying to keep up with all their other committee assignments, constituent issues, get educated on things that they have no idea about, all of these things take time. And that's why I want to make sure that we have a session where we can focus on nothing but being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. Absolutely 100%.
Randy Grau, State Representative, please find out about that issue on Monday for us, or whatever that we brought up, okay? About auditing the higher ed. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess we just left the room. Okay, I was gonna say, if you're a candidate, you can stand up and give us a 30-second or 1-minute pitch. Okay, we'll move on here. There's somebody else in here too. Where'd Scott go? Okay, Scott, okay, you got 1 minute to give us your just due, sir. Good to see you, buddy.
Well, I'm T.W. Shannon. I'm running for the United States Senate. It's an honor to be here with fellow patriots. We're certainly traveling the state and talking to people about the need to send somebody to Washington, D.C. who's going to say no to the rising debt and excessive spending. We've done it in the State House while I was Speaker, and I think we can do it in Washington, D.C. as well. We'd love to have your support. Happy to stick around for a little while and answer a few questions, but I'm going to get to the next meeting as well. So thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Okay, now, if Gary Jones, you can take the mic. He wants to go to the mic and make a couple comments and suggest whatever. And then Jerry Fent wants to at the same time, so we'll go there next.
Well, thank you very much. And let me say real quick, I called home last week. My wife was telling me that she had to take the kids to, the grandkids to the dance, my grandson to wrestling, and had all these different things. And I said, well, do I need to reconsider running for re-election and come home and help you out? And she paused for a minute and said, what good would that do? so that, said, she just had a whole lot of other things she would want me to do. Said, so because of that, I'm announcing today I'm running for re-election.
So is that breaking news, Gary? Is that that's a high-end club breaking news event?
Yes.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
And let me just say this, that I think if it's done properly, just the idea of slowing down the process of at the Capitol, it's mass confusion on 4th floor. So between the mass confusion on the 4th floor and the micromanagement coming out 2nd floor, we've got problems. But let me tell you, I got Preston Dorflinger, who's the manager of, or the director of the Office of Management and Enterprise Services. Don't call it OMS. They don't like to call it OMS, but the formal term is one big mess. We've thrown all this stuff out there. But he came up to me about 2 months ago and said, Gary, great article in the Washington Times. I said, what are you talking about? So you're quoted throughout this article in the Washington Times. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. So he forwarded it to me, and the article is titled, Feds Should Follow Oklahoma's Lead on Budget. And in fact, Google that and you'll find the article. And so I started reading through the article, and it talks about what Oklahoma's doing and how it's saving money. And it says, Governor Fallon's auditor, Gary Jones, has recommended a form of doing the budget called needs-based budgeting, which is a modified version of the zero-based budgeting, where you actually go in and look at what you need not based on what historically has been done. Because I will tell you that when you look at 74 line items in the Oklahoma budget, most years over 60 of those are next year are exactly the same. And if they're changed, the majority of them are changed on an incremental basis. You know, we have 5% less money, we give you 5% less. We have 3% more, we give you 3% more. It's amazing to me how we keep hearing this term of right-sizing government. I will tell you, based on what I've seen since I've been there, the government must have been the right size since we got there, because we haven't changed it. But needs-based, but a perfect example, and Representative Grau talked about this, about somebody said, I can get by with a 3.5% cut in my budget. I can get by with a 5% cut in my budget. Let me tell you a perfect example. I went to talk, now we got 15 minutes to talk before the Senate committee talked about our budget. And I was scheduled to go at 10 o'clock, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, a movie came to mind. And I went before the senators. I said, this morning I was thinking about coming to see you, and this movie came to mind. It's called The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. Yeah. I said, if you remember that movie, the character that played the governor, someone would ask him this question, and he'd give this big, long, elaborate answer, and he'd walk out of the room, and they'd look at each other and say, what did he say? And he'd start singing this little jingle and dancing, saying, dance a little sidestep, now you see me, now you don't. I said, I can walk in here and tell you anything, and you don't have enough information to know whether or not I'm telling you the truth. I said, let me tell you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. In 2011 to 2012, we got $600,000 less in appropriated funds from the legislature. In 2011, we got $300,000 from the federal government to monitor the stimulus funds. We didn't get that in 12. Most people are going to walk in here and tell you that we took a $900,000 cut in budget between 11 and 12. But we didn't, and here's why. Because half of our budget came from billed services. We reduced the number of administrative people, increased our efficiency. We billed $1.2 million more in 2012 by becoming more efficient than we were before. My budget went up by $300,000. And I'm going to show you 10 years worth of historic history on how we spend everything and how efficiently and effectively we ran our operations. Another example, one of those agencies that walked in and said, I want to be the model of how government's run. We're asking for a 5% cut in appropriated, actually they said asking for a 5% cut in our budget, and this is the way government should be run. But if you went back and analyzed their budget, what you'll find is their appropriated funds only made up 28% of their actual budget. The other revenues had gone up by 29%. So they took a 5% cut in appropriated funds, and if you look at how much money they spent, how much they got in $7.8 million. They only spent 6.5. And they're sitting there telling people we're taking a cut. So they're getting $1.3 million more than what they've needed, and they're sitting on $6 million in reserves. And they're telling you this is the way government should be run. I said, no, what we should do is we should determine what the needs are, look at how much money they have in all sources of revenue other than appropriated funds, and only consider appropriated funds after we figure out if they need it, and only after looking at how much they have stockpiled away in the rat hole, and use that money, and then that way we can fix the capital based on the amount of money sitting on the reserve funds. And we can also come back and we can truly base budgets on what's needed, not what has historically been done. So that being said, if the process is that we do budget every other year, but then that off year, that we have true budget experts that go in there and analyze those budgets to come back and say, this is what's needed, not those agencies that are walking out there saying, you know what, I can get by with 5% less, because you know what, they probably have 30 or 40% more than they need. So if that's done in conjunction with this alternate budget, it can be a very good process. But if it's not done, if it's the same people coming back and telling the same dog and pony shows that they've always do, then the process is not going to work. So just want to say that and open it up for any questions anybody might have.
Any questions for Gary?
Yeah, my name's Harold Hodges. Most of this you've been talking about here earlier, way over my head. I didn't understand most of it. Why have they waited 25 or so years to repair the Capitol? They put a new dome on it. Looks like that would be squashing the whole thing down toward the ground. It's not. Okay, I'm wrong.
And here's the reason. The reason is that the tendency is for the legislators to push off to somebody else to spend the money to repair or to make those changes on somebody else. And they're going to spend every penny they can get and every penny they can borrow on something else instead of, in fact, we did an audit on the Department of Central Services, and what we said is the problem with this is the legislature over the years has ignored their routine maintenance, and this has gotten to the point now where it's critical. It can be fixed a lot less expensively than what's been done there, but what needs to happen is like you do in your home. You have to allocate a certain amount of money for routine maintenance to keep things up, and over the years they have not done that. They've done the same thing with the pension funds as well. They sloughed that off and pretended that pension obligation each year that's supposed to be paid should not, that we don't pay it, and then all of a sudden the debt is because they pretend to balance the budget, but they don't really because they're not paying the bills that they owe each year.
Thanks, Gary. My mother loves you. I don't think there's ever going to be a bigger compliment. My mother, what she does, she's handicapped. She lives.
My dogs and my grandkid love me too. So with your mother,
well, I'm going to tell you something. Now this is a very true statement. What she does, she listens to all the news programs. Fox, on and on, reads all day long because she's got muscular dystrophy, and so she can't handle it. And she says, of all the political people that I know or have heard of, she said, Gary's my favorite. So would you please come to my house and see my mother? There was a question of a state rep to do something on Monday. So sometime this week when you're in town, I want you to come to my house and just shake my mother's hand because it's going to thrill her to death. Okay, and she's actually voted for you. So anyway, but thanks, Gary. We got a quick. Yep, no. We got another question for Gary? Okay.
Hi, Gary, I'm Travis. Just curious, who makes the final determination when the budget is approved, and also who decides what process is going to be used to determine the budget? You're making some good comments here, but can the governor say we're going to do it that way, or the head of the House and Senate say that, or how does that work?
Well, the governor puts out a proposed budget, but the House and the Senate, they have input in the budget as well. And the problem is there's not enough people that have input into that process. Many times, next thing you know, at the very end of session, they come back and say we have a budget, and they go up and down on it. There's not enough scrutiny to go through and analyze that during the process. It's kind of a closed door deal where they get together and they decide what the budget's going to be, and then they come back and ask the members to vote on it.
No matter, and we've talked about that issue right there in this room several different times, no matter how bright and smart and how important they think they are, most legislators do not have that right to go over that budget or have any input in that budget. What Gary just said, they get, here's the budget, vote on it, we're leaving town tomorrow, or today, we're shutting it down today. There's probably maybe 8 to 9 people that are really involved in the budget. Am I right, Gary?
You're correct.
Okay. So all our representatives that you elect, they're not important enough to know about the budget. So they could not tell you, if you were their constituent, what's going on with the budget. Am I right or wrong?
We went before the House Committee this year, and we laid everything out. And after they said, great, we really appreciate what you're doing, you run a great operation, said, now tell us what you would do if you took a 5% cut in appropriations. I said, well, I would hope that that's not the way you're going to do the budget. And I said, but if that's the case, then you know what, we'll make it work. Whatever you give us, we'll make it work. But we would hope that you would take a little more scrutiny than doing just a straight across the board cut for everybody.
Question.
I'm Paul. What do you think about using the unclaimed property money to fix the Capitol?
I will tell you that the law says that the treasurer is required to determine what the amount of money that's required to be on reserves based on a calculation or a formula that they have to justify. It's interesting in the fact that and it says that if there is surplus funds, those surplus funds will be appropriated to the general fund. The idea that somebody is saying that I have money that can go for a particular project in that position, I think is irresponsible, and I think that is outside of their constitutional ability to dedicate that money. And that should be if there is indeed, excess funds, which we need to go back and we will go back and determine whether or not that formula has been followed. Because I know in fiscal year 2012, they allocated, said that there was 15 million in surplus. In 13, they said that there was 27 million. In 14, they said there's 35. Now we're hearing a rumor of 40.
Yeah.
And in fact, I read something today that said there's increased pressure by the legislature to spend this money. It's not the legislature's place to determine that money needs to be spent. There should be a formula that says that there's enough in there to cover those reserves. If there's not, that money should never be transferred.
Here's another little thing to think about. Now I'm not blaming anybody, but I just want you to think about this. If you were the treasurer and you never ever gave any money back to anybody, no matter how many times they give you their social security number, their current address, or whatever, you're kind of holding somebody's money. Wouldn't you kind of say that, okay? And that's what I'm accusing somebody of doing. Because I own an investigation company. We know how to locate people. We know some person or family members that are owed approximately $400,000+ that we cannot get the treasurer's office to give that money back, okay? Now think about that. Now how many more people are owed money? That money is owed to some person or some family member that they're holding in trust for those people. And they're entitled to that money. And anything short of that is thievery on the state of Oklahoma or any other government. The same way that I'm going to make this little point, the same way that I consider thievery of holding that stolen piece of art down at the University of Oklahoma that belongs to that family member and friends. Okay.
Let me say, I'm not sure exactly what the total amount of money that's being held, is supposed to be held, as far as the this is how much money we found that belongs to these people, but I believe it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think we have something like 94 million that's actually in reserve. So if everybody came back and asked for their money at once, we would have a small fraction of what's owed.
Okay, so you proved me wrong. Okay, next question.
My name is Christy, and Oklahoma has a lot going for it in this country nowadays. They're floating the idea of reducing or eliminating the state tax, and I'm just wondering what revenue streams they will replace that with. I recently moved up here from Texas, and I know property taxes down there are extremely high.
Sales tax.
Let's do this right now. Okay. Obviously.
Born and raised Oklahoma, and I lived there for work, so anyway, what revenue streams are being tossed around? I'm just curious. First-time homeowner, I don't want to get besieged with more taxes.
Well, and one of the things we've seen is a huge increase in fees. We increase fees, and we don't call them taxes, we call them fees, and we have seen fees go up significantly, so I think that may be one by which they're increasing those revenues.
Okay, one more question, then we're moving on.
David, so is it going to take statute to go to a needs-based budget, or can just people of authority start just deciding they can do this?
Right now, in fact, those of you that know that when I first came in, we tried to get a bill on the ballot or a resolution on the ballot that would allow us to have a permanent funding source to be able to audit every non-federal government entity in the state of Oklahoma, which would mean we could audit universities, schools, and do performance audits based on a needs-based budget. That passed the committees in the House and Senate unanimously. It did not get a vote on the floor. In fact, one of the senators that happened to be the appropriation chairman said that was growing government and gave us too much power. What people didn't realize is that at the same time they were pushing a bill and calling it the accountability bill that created performance teams in the Office of Management Enterprise Services and gave them $3.5 million a year. And what's interesting about that particular deal is that bill was designed after a law that got passed in Virginia, because Virginia's auditor's office did not have a performance division. What's interesting is that the state of Virginia sent out questionnaires to all the state auditor's offices across the country that were doing performance audits. They were on the questionnaire, 38 states responded. They narrowed it down to 3. Those 3 states responded, and they narrowed it down to 1 state to model their performance division after. They came and met with that state, and they are now designing their performance division after that state, which is Oklahoma. But we gave $3.5 million a year across the hall. They won't walk across the hall and talk to us. Virginia came all the way out here to talk to us to get parameters after that. But that being said, The Office of Management Enterprise Services has $3.5 million a year solely for performance teams. What needs to happen, in my opinion, is that they need to be doing those performance reviews, those zero needs-based budgeting performance every year. And then what needs to happen in addition to that is the larger agencies, if they come back and they make a request that's greater than what the Office of Management Enterprise Service say their needs are, then I think they would have to be subject to a performance audit by our office before they can get a penny more than what has been recommended by that. Then you would put a structure in place that can get control of this. So,
Gary, if someone wanted to make a contribution to your campaign, what would the check need to be made out of?
Friends of Gary Jones.
Friends of Gary Jones. Okay, you're going to get a check from Linda Daney for Friends of Gary Jones. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
Appreciate you very much. Next, okay, Jerry Finn, please take the front. Jerry wants to talk a little bit about the budget, and this is good. You know, let me kind of reintroduce Jerry Finn. Jerry, I called him yesterday because we thought there would be some discussion on maybe some log rolling, constitutional log rolling or whatever. And since Gary's represented us taxpayers so many different times at the Supreme Court on those issues, he just said, yes, I'll be there, and thank you very much for coming, Jerry. Thanks.
Thank you. Since we had the discussion about the budget each year with the legislature, I'd just like to inform you as to the real story behind it that nobody really likes to talk about because it is one of the biggest scandals Oklahoma is having each year at the legislative division of the state of Oklahoma. Now, I'm sorry I have to tell you this bad news because a lot of you will probably leave here sick or vomiting or something like that when you hear the real truth about the budget. Okay, in about 1927, a Mr. Edwards, a taxpayer, noticed that there was a statute that levied 7 cents of gasoline tax when he bought gasoline. And the statute said the money went directly to the Department of Transportation. Well, Mr. Edwards, as taxpayer, just a normal guy, he kind of knew about the Constitution in the state of Oklahoma. And he looked at a provision called Article 5, Section 55, which stated, it was in our original Constitution, 1907, no money shall ever be paid out of the treasury of the state, nor of any of its funds, nor of any of the funds under its management, except in pursuance to an appropriation. So in 1927, there were numerous statutes where they levied a tax, a fee, or cost, and the money went directly to a state agency and was never appropriated by the legislature. That provision there is accountability. When you elect somebody to be with the legislature, you want to know what they're doing, what they're voting on. Well, Mr. Edwards brought up the problem that there was billions in 1927 being actually spent by the state of Oklahoma without an appropriation. And he filed it to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court, state judges protecting the state of Oklahoma, don't quote me when I say that, had to do something because they knew millions of dollars was being charged against the taxpayers of Oklahoma and not ever being appropriated by the legislature to find out if the legislators are accountable to how they spend the money. So our Oklahoma Supreme Court wisely said, oh, this is an exception to the Constitution. That's, to me, to say that something is an exception is disregarding the Constitution. They took an oath to support the Constitution, and here they get tough cases like that, and some of mine where I lose it purposely on the fact that the state courts are protecting the state of Oklahoma, not the taxpayer. So in 1927, it's the Edwards case, and the Supreme Court came out and said, oh, that's an exception to the Constitution. So the legislature can assess taxes, costs, and fees to people and go directly to a state agency and doesn't have to be appropriated. Wow. Boy, the insiders and the corrupt legislators saw, well, hey, I need to get a statute to get some money over to my group, my lobbyist, he's for, and this and that. And once I get that statute set up and the money going over there, the legislature will probably never know about that little old statute. So over the years since 1927 to today, there's been evidently more statutes, dozens and dozens and dozens of new statutes which assess a fee, a tax, or cost against you, and the money goes directly to an agency to be spent on somebody's friends or whatever it is, and it's never appropriated. Well, over the years it comes up, and we've heard the talk about the state budget being $6,700,000,000, the present state budget. But people on the inside who really know the money coming into the state of Oklahoma through these statutes say there's another $6 billion coming into the state of Oklahoma and being spent presently without an appropriation. Nobody reviews that. New legislators come in and they're just like kids. They don't know what's going on. It takes them probably 5 or 6 years to kind of know what's going on, and then they're termed out 14 years. So we actually, from reliable sources, you can talk to people, there's over $13 billion coming into the state of Oklahoma, and about only half of it is publicly said, oh, this is the budget. Oh, we got to balance this budget. And there's actually $6 billion over there going to friends and purposes that probably have died off. They didn't need it for that, but it's still going into that. Now, on the Edwards case, the Supreme Court did put a little restriction there. They said, now, when you have a statute like that, it's directly assessed against the people or whoever the cost or tax or fee is being levied against. And it goes directly. But the Edwards case says you cannot have it coming out of the General Revenue Fund. And that is what the newspapers today in this session have been talking about. They're on it, but they don't want to really tell you the story. They have enacted over the years statutes that says 4% of the General Revenue Fund for this year goes to ABC Corporation. 2% from the General Revenue Fund goes to this corporation or this entity. And during the years now, these percentages coming out of the General Revenue Fund before it goes to the State Board of Equalization, it's being reduced. And you hear the stories, they're $600 million short in the general budget because these statutes that take a percentage out of the General Revenue Fund before the State Board of Equalization hears or comes up with a budget, the money is not there. So we literally have dozens of statutes, unconstitutional, that is taking money out of the General Revenue Fund when it gets into it before the State Board of Equalization comes up with their budget. And that money will be going all through the year. And that is why today the budget's going to be lower, because these percentages have gotten higher and higher. So I'm sorry, but that's the truth. That's what's happening today. And kind of makes you sick that there's actually, the state of Oklahoma has $13 billion to spend, and only half of it is accountable. The legislatures look over and come up with a budget based on that.
Thanks, Jerry. Any questions, Jerry? While I'm taking this mic over there, there's one thing what he's telling you is absolutely the truth. When I was running for state office, I tried to get a grasp on the spending and the budget in Oklahoma. And I was told by OCPA, Jonathan Small, OCPA, it's somewhere, but the overall spending is somewhere between $25 and $35 billion. And I said, my gosh, $10 billion? I mean, what words? Because just what he's saying, can't account for it.
Hi, Jerry. Thanks for coming. My name is Woody. Where in the Oklahoma Constitution has the Supreme Court been given the power, the Supreme Court of Oklahoma, been given the power to make exceptions to the Oklahoma Constitution?
I I don't think they have that. They've all taken an oath. I've got copies of the oaths. When I sue state agency heads, I get copies of their oath that they say they will support and obey the Constitution. I think all the judges have to take that oath also. So I say that their opinion is unconstitutional. Their exception is unconstitutional.
Every time somebody disagrees with me, they're wrong. Okay, any more questions?
No, that's basically.
Okay, wait a minute, we got a couple of questions here. Stay right there, son.
Yeah, Travis, how is the federal dollars handled that come into the state agencies? Are they earmarked directly, say, to education or environmental control or stuff like that? Is that included in the state budgeting process? Or it just go?
I don't know.
So we don't have any idea how much is actually coming in then.
Yeah, the state of Oklahoma.
Okay, hold on, we can actually answer that question, okay? Somebody that, hold on, just a second, let Gary.
You can look at the annual, what's called CAFR, Consolidated Annual Financial Report, that's filed with the Office of Management and Enterprise Service. We actually audit that, and it includes all the funds, not just, because what he's talking about, there are funds that come in that are appropriate, there are funds that are coming in through fees, like he said, it's not, that's about an equal amount, and then there's probably 9 to 10 billion on top of that in federal funds. So that's where you come up with the $20-something million total. But you go through look at that consolidated annual financial report, and you can see those numbers there.
Okay, hold on here. Do you have one? Okay, let's do one more, and then I want to kind of move on here.
Yeah, Harold Hodges again. In other words, what you're saying, in all of these audits that we have every year should just be kind of canceled and go get a beer or something.
No, don't on here, Max, because you ought to be you can't drink beer when you ought to be drinking whiskey. Okay, no, that's a joke. No, just calm down.
Thank you. That's all I need.
Jerry, thank you very much for coming. That means a lot. Thank you. Okay. Now, we've got two representatives in the room. I wish we had another one because it was on the other side of that. But I want to talk just a little bit about the calendar committee that got killed this week or yesterday in the House of Representatives. Now, how many in here have ever heard of the calendar committee? How many in here really understands about the calendar committee? Thank you, because I'm about the same way you are. Okay, so the two representatives, go take your turn. Paul Wesselhoft, Mike Reynolds, if you'll please explain to us why it was important to kill the calendar committee on your thinking.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. Can I answer two things that are floating out there? Number one, according to the architects, the dome on the Capitol has nothing to do with the repairs that are needed. Gary Jones is right. We've neglected that through the decades, and that's why those repairs are necessary. It has nothing to do with the weight of the dome, according to the architects. That's number one. I'm not an architect, so I don't know. I'm just giving you the information. Number two, Common Core. Folks, I'll take a vote here. We've only got two options of Common Core. The governor that you elected is a champion of Common Core. You know that. The Senate is a champion of Common Core. The House doesn't want Common Core. So here's our dilemma. We've got two bills addressing Common Core. One tells the governor to shove it. We don't want Common Core. Get rid of it. That's bill number one. Okay, that's option number one. Well, do you think that bill's going to be signed by the governor? No. Do you think that bill is going to get a hearing in the Senate? Probably not. So that's option number one. Here's option number two. We have another bill that will delay Common Core another year so they can continue to bring more pressure to get rid of it. And buys us a year. That's option number two. So let's take a vote. Which one do you want us to do? Option number one or option number two? Who wants option number one?
Give us the
and if we do option number one, then Common Core will be implemented next school year. So that's option number one. Because the government's not going to sign a bill that kills her baby. Option number two, it delays a year. Seems like there's more votes on delay. I'll let our caucus know that.
Okay, but let me do this too, though, okay, because I do know a little bit about this, okay? To me, one of the most informed people in the state of Oklahoma on education is Linda Murphy.
Yes.
Linda Murphy. Would you disagree or agree?
No, I agree.
Okay. She says The one that we want is Gus Blackwell's bill, whatever bill that is. That's the bill that we want. Because to continue it on is just passing the buck on down the road.
Okay, well, I'm pretty sure his is option number one, to tell the governor to come forward.
The one that Jason Nelson has is a no-no.
That's the one.
No.
That's the one that buys us another year.
Okay, that's the no-no. You don't keep kicking the can down the road. You want to kill the thing, get it over with.
Then it'll be implemented next year.
That's Linda Murphy's thinking.
Okay, then it'll be implemented because the governor won't sign Blackwell's bill. Instead of probably going to hear it. But I'm saying, this is not an easy situation.
Yeah, but Paul, really though, literally, we know that the governor's opinion changes too, okay? When the only thing we'll ever ask of anybody, just do the job that you've got tasked with doing. As a legislator, pass the bills. If the governor vetoes them, let them veto, and let us charge ahead on that. And that's no threat, I mean, but that's what a legislative body does. Do the bills and let,
and that'll give ammunition to unelect this governor, hopefully if she vetoes it.
I didn't say that. Okay. But okay. Okay, go ahead. Let's start with the other deal.
Okay, well, the calendar committee. To begin with, and I made this, Mike and I debated to do away with the calendar committee along with the new speaker, and on the other side was Sally Kernan, she was here today to give her spiel. She debated in favor of the calendar committee along with Jason Murphy. It's pretty much Jason Murphy's baby. But I too was a champion of the calendar committee originally, because originally I have been victimized by one of the floor leaders, Dan Sullivan. Wouldn't hear a couple of my bills that passed out unanimously, and he would not hear it. Not only would he not hear it, he wouldn't tell me why he wouldn't hear it. So that's why I was for the calendar committee, because I thought that would protect us. But in theory, that's what it was supposed to do. If the calendar committee, your bill gets out of there, it's going to get a hearing on the floor. In reality, that's not the case. In reality, the floor leader can still kill your bill. I saw her kill a few bills yesterday in a private meeting that you were not able to attend. So also, the speaker can also kill your bill too. So in reality, the calendar committee just became another hoop for us to jump over to get our bills eventually to the governor's desk. So we thought it was redundant, and most of the people were against the calendar committee. That was the consensus. What I want to clarify, and I did this on the floor of the House, it was not the speaker's idea. And it was projected on Mike McCardle and other places like this was a power grab by the new speaker. He's doing away with Shannon's baby, and now he's consolidating power. It was not Hickman's idea. It didn't come from Hickman. It came from a number of people that are on his leadership team, and I'm one of them. I was there, so I saw a consensus build, and they wanted to do away with the calendar committee. We presented that to our caucus. And unfortunately, it wasn't whipped. It should have been whipped. But it seems like the consensus was to do away with the calendar. And obviously, the vote reflects that, because there were only, 3 or 4 votes to save it? 9. Not 9 votes to save it, and everyone else wanted to do away with the calendar committee. So that kind of brings you up to date.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Option number 3, cut the governor's budget in half to see if she'll pass Common Core. And not pass any bills sent over from the Senate by Senator Ford, who killed Common Core. Why don't we fight with the same rules they fight with? In fact, why don't we fight stronger? I don't get it. Okay, the calendar committee. Well, we've seen a person that he's great at blogging, Jason Murphy, but he's not very good at debating or asking questions. I addressed that yesterday in the session. 8 years, never asked a question. That was by his own admission a year or so ago in a meeting we had. Never debated for or against anybody else's bills. Now, he said yesterday he'd asked questions before, but I'm still waiting for him to send me the email showing me when he did it. Because maybe he has, but then it contradicts what he previously said. The calendar committee was nothing more than another protection for the Speaker of the House. Not the current Speaker of the House, the Speaker of the House that was sitting in the room today. Nothing more than another protection for him. If you want to pull up the floor calendar right now, you can see a bill that's been on there ready to be heard for the last 2 weeks. We haven't heard it yet. Floor leader hasn't brought it up. Is it surprising? What bothers me is this was pointed out last year when we adopted the rules. I think it's actually in the debate that I had on the floor of the House. There was no requirement that bills be heard on the floor, even if they passed the calendar committee. So I said, hey, where's that requirement? If this is going to be such a great thing, they need to come to the floor in the order that the calendar committee passes them out. No, they come to the floor in whatever order either the floor leader or the previous speaker wanted them to come. Now, I understand a little bit of organizational work on the floor leader's part, because at 11:15 in the morning, you probably don't want to bring up a bill that's going to last 2 or 3 hours. Probably better to bring up a short bill, let everybody go to lunch, and bring it up at 1 o'clock, as opposed to introducing the Kingfisher High School football team at 1 o'clock. I mean, so the calendar committee was nothing but protection for T.W. Shannon so that he could run for more issues. That's all it was. And anybody that claims otherwise simply doesn't have the moxie to understand what's going on at the Oklahoma State Capitol.
Okay,
Thank you. Is that the date order?
yeah, but it wouldn't make any sense, I mean, the whole.
Oh, it would.
Okay.
Just click the
No,
available.
we're way over time here.
Okay.
We need to end. Go ahead and finish up, do a quick wrap up. On your thought, whatever your thought is.
Well, the calendar committee's gone. It should be gone. There were other things that should be gone. There's a horrendous thing out there that we're not going to really be able to get rid of. But much like Representative Grau's presentation today on his constitutional amendment, which I consider to be utter nonsense, Representative Grau just voted against every bill in the odd number year. And just, if you've got so many people supporting your thing, get them to all vote against it. There are so many things that people want to propose because they won't do the right thing in the chamber, but they're going to go out and portray themselves as doing the right thing publicly. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, we passed a bill. Y'all think it's a good idea for people to take foreign language in college? Yes. In high school? Yesterday, we passed a bill with only one dissenting vote that said, from now on, native languages will be considered world languages. You understand what that means? So now we can start teaching Choctaw, Chickasaw, et cetera, You think any colleges in Oklahoma or around the nation are going to care that you learn a Native American language? But the members of the House, with one exception, and that would be me, said, yeah, let's go ahead and pass that. And I'm sure they thought in the back of their minds, but it'll die in the Senate, so we don't have to worry about that stupid vote. And it's time to elect some people that'll stand up, have some nerve, and say, no, we're not going to do that. That's silly. I mean, that's what we heard on the Davy Crockett thing this morning, and everybody, I'm sure, thought that was a really good deal. So, see where your legislature stands on these issues, and when they won't stand up and fight for it, get somebody new.
Thanks very much. Okay, there's a couple of things I want to make, a couple of little announcements. Gary Jones, thank you very much for being here today. And good, Gary, good luck on your campaign. Friends of Gary Jones, we do, Hyman doesn't endorse, Bob Danny says, Friends of Gary Jones is a good check to be cut. Jerry Fent, thank you very much for coming today, Jerry, that means a lot to us. No, don't take off, okay? No, I want Reed to stand up here. We're going to end this deal very civilly. Here's High Noon Club, what I believe at the finest. Now, we know come Tuesday, there's going to be a vote taken for the mayor's race in Oklahoma City. Has anybody ever heard there's not a mayor's race going on? Does anybody, would you please, okay. Now, we know the media's done their job, and the two candidates have done, there's actually 4 candidates, but there's really 2 candidates out there. Now, Reed, tell us who you're actually going to vote for. Or you're supporting, I'll just say it that way.
Nick Cornett.
And that's good, and that's good. I mean, that's his right for. Now, I'm on the other complete opposite side of that. I'm going to vote for Ed Shooting. Okay, I want that to be also known. But the thing about with High Noon Club, what we can do, we can come down here and civilly discuss issues. And if you can't do that, you might as well just go on home and scratch your head or do whatever you're going to do, or pull your pants up, or whatever you think is fun to you. But again, if you want to know why Reed's supporting the mayor, Mick Cornett, go talk to him. If you want to know why I'm supporting Ed Shadid, please come talk to me, and we'll see you all down there next hopefully down here next week at Heinz Club. Thank you, everybody, for coming.